So hello, everybody. I'll be talking about this kind of couple cluster extension we developed and how we applied it to twisted graphene layer. This project kind of started in the theoretical physics group in Manchester and kind of continued on to Imperial, and then kind of helped with giving me the computational resources I needed to actually do this. So why are we actually doing this? The outline of this whole presentation. So I'll talk about more the computing side of this project rather than the physics of it. So why do we actually need this extended couple cluster, how it helps with describing these strongly correlated systems, how we actually derived the equation implemented on NVIDIA 100, and what do we actually get in the results. Graphene obviously is very interesting. This is probably the most interesting result everyone's seen. It has this insulating and superconducting phases that by differentiating the voltage you apply, it kind of switches between. I'll talk about this a bit more later. So extended couple cluster. So I think most people are familiar with couple cluster. Mr. Laser. So this is the usual couple cluster, and that usually have this, set of basis wave function. You just expand it in this exponential operator to get your to minimize your actual wave function. So we developed this. It's actually an approximation of what is actually supposed to happen. There's some papers talking about extended couple cluster, but it has never been derived because the mass is quite nasty. So we actually were able to derive these equations. It differs only by this extra factor here, which kind of makes it more describable, these systems. The main idea is that extended couple cluster at singles level, which you can see here, singles would be only using these equations, describes exactly Hartree-Fock. Couple cluster doesn't do this. It's a variational way to describe systems in a more full way. And if we add doubles onto it, it describes correlation. So basically, this method would describe the system fully. As I said, the math is difficult to implement. So we were the first ones actually could do the algebra, and we did this by rather than using your usual virtual and occupied orbital approach. We have some, virtual orbitals, and you destroy an occupied, and the operator expands into these virtual orbitals. We instead used the particle hole formalism, where you actually create a hole and create a particle. That's why you see that they're only just annihilation or just destruction operators, because we're not destroying an occupied orbital and creating a virtual one. We're creating a hole and creating a particle. So yeah, we derived these equations. Here you can see some examples. For example, the particle number. These contain these tensors, these expansion amplitudes. The actual energy equation I have not shown here, but it gets very, very long. And as you can see, we bump into this problem that it has these 4 tensors, which scale horrendously on a GPU or are extremely slow on a CPU. Yeah, so let's skip forward to that. So how did we actually implement this? So in quantum mechanics, to solve the system, we literally just minimize. It's a constraint minimization problem. We minimize the energy, plus we constrain the particle number. We use this interesting form that's better for the system. That won't talk about it here. So when we initially run this calculation, it's very difficult because, as I said, it scales horribly. It's very slow and it doesn't fit on a GPU. So the highest memory GPU I had available was A100, provided by the HX1 facility, very mercifully. So to counteract this, we further took these rank 4 tensors and implemented momentum conservation to reduce them down to rank 3 tensors, takes less memory. And even further, we applied singular value decomposition. This is because these tensors can have elements that are extremely small. So we kind of can truncate this from a rank 4 tensor to just having rank 3 tensors. And then the third dimension of this rank 3 tensor, we can scale 10 times less. We also used optimized Onitsum functions. These kind of work in the background to make these operations even more efficient. And we sprinkled some checkpoints everywhere to kind of push it, use less memory and make it more costly, so it actually fits on this A100. So we ended up running this calculation, and this included 80% of the physical short-range effects, which is usually a one body operator, and 70% of the long-range interactions, which are these horrible rank 4 tensors. These are the physical effects, not just the numerical ones. And we got to simulate around 1,000 sites. This took 1 hour on an A100 GPU to actually simulate, and we calculated all the observables we wanted at the qualitative accuracy. Here we can see the scaling of it. It scaled pretty good, just needed 20 cycles on an A100. And we converged it by basically stopping it when the energy changes by 1 in a million. So that was the computing part that quickly skewed through the physics of it. So why we're interested in graphene? Graphene won a Nobel Prize, as you know. The interesting idea is you can isolate these atomic monolayers of graphene, which is the most easiest way to actually go to this single atomic limit. There are even some more studies that have these monolayer graphene flakes, where you can literally just get structures of a few atoms. So when we just used this method to simulate monolayer graphene, we got agreement with the Fermi level and band energy experiments. So that was a good test. The twisted magic angle layer graphene is when we take those two layers and kind of twist them a very tiny angle. The problem is when you twist it at the 1 degree angle, you kind of need to simulate around 1 million atoms, which is very difficult. And since this system has no band gap, all the physics are determined by these long-range 4-rank tensors. So it's a very nasty calculation. So we just use this low-energy continuum model where we use the fact that it has a very small angle. I won't go too much into detail of this. So we kind of use this kind of one hexagonal brilliant zone with the 3 closest cells and simulate the hopping process from these 3 closest hexagonal cells to the 7 nearest ones in the other layer. Here the picture kind of shows it from one of the research articles. And we used a simple kind of metallic gate potential, which kind of models the fact that it's enclosed in HBN layers experimentally. So first we got the band structure. We kind of reproduce these effects where if you implement interactions, the band gaps shrink a lot. You might be surprised that we're just using 4 points to model this, but as I said, the brilliant zone in comparison to monolayer graphene is 80 times less, so it's very smooth, so we can afford to use these few points. And we got the Hartree-Fock results match well with other simulations. And one of the initial results we got that correlations don't have any impact on the band gaps, but it has impact on the Fermi level, altering its conductivity. But the main thing we wanted to look at was superconductivity. So we need to describe correlations quite well. So we simulated the band gap. We got surprisingly, almost this uniform band gap, but you can see some higher order harmonics here as well. And in the end, we got good agreement with the critical angle and temperature values, critical temperature values of the experiment, which is around 1 Kelvin and 1 degree, meaning that when we hit 1 Kelvin, it becomes superconducting. So we did not find the description of the insulating phases. We think it comes from phonon effect, which is a very nasty calculation, and I don't think anyone knows how to do that at this point. So further work, I'll discuss it a bit. So we want to decide implement this exciton energy calculation, which essentially we're looking at not a 1 excitation, but a particle hole and when 3 combines. This is a bit of a nasty calculation. By excitons even further when you excite 2 particles in 2 holes. So I'm very interested in listening to HX2 that it has more RAM in the GPUs to run these calculations. And the obvious candidate to actually look at is transitional metal TMD materials. They're more compact transistors in a monolayer sense, but also in a twisted bilayer sense. They're very interesting. And generally, the whole goal would be that these Moire systems, in combination with phonon calculations, which is something completely else, but they're doing part of my PhD, are a realistic candidate to develop these room temperature superconductors. But as I said, the algebras are messy and need a lot of compute power. So I'm very happy to hear that we have even more RAM available on a GPU. Thank you.